Good evening, one and all. In this session, we'll continue seeing some bit of graphics, that is, graphical user interface, and also how we can use the Java database connectivity along with the GUI, okay, to develop a front end as well as a back end. Okay, you can consider them as the basis to design your front end as well as back end. So, before that, has anyone developed any GUI which you had learned last time, or any of your own GUI? Or you've at least tried something?
Yes, sir, I have tried. Just a minute, I'm logging from desktop.
Okay, yeah, you can share your screen and you can run it also.
Yes, sir, just 2 minutes.
Okay, okay. Anyone else has done it? Okay, till then I'll just revise some things that we have seen already. So basically we use the GUI in which we have seen till now we have certain buttons, we have certain labels, we have text fields. Okay, so text fields are where you can enter some data, the user can enter some data, which can be used to retrieve the data from the database, or it can also be stored inside the database. Okay, so such examples are also, we have to see them. So last time we have seen that using JDBC, we can display the data from the database inside our program as the output of the program. That is using which query? Which query did we use in order to retrieve the data from the database and to display it? Which query have we used for that? How do we select the data from the database? Which query? What is that query called? It is the select query only, right? Am I audible?
Yes, it's like select star from the table or table name.
Yeah, so that's what, yeah. So we have seen the select query. That is just, we know that here we are not modifying any data from the database, or we are not storing any data. Whatever is there, we can read that much. Now, what if we want to um, update some data? Like for example, insert some data or delete some data or modify the table name or something like that. Okay, so that is about how we can update the data. There are this is called as data manipulation, in which you are changing or updating the data, and the queries used for them, usually basically there are three queries: update, delete, and insert. These are called as DML queries. DML stands for data manipulation language queries. Sonali, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you can present your screen to show whatever you have developed.
I have made a simple calculator where I have added addition, subtraction, and multiplication. I'll run the problem.
Okay. Actually, your voice is breaking. Yeah, it is visible. Now you can demonstrate it. Okay.
I entered the values and the answer is zero and I click this button.
Yes. Yes. Very good.
So, here login and when I click this, it's
Yes.
ready.
Correct. Now, one modification that you can do is, as I saw, you need to, I mean, in your application, you are able to use a single field for displaying the separate results. I mean, you're using multiple fields to display multiple results. Means when you're subtracting, the result is shown in one text field. When you're multiplying, the result is shown in another text field, and adding also, result is shown in another text field. But instead of that, you can use a single text field like how we have our calculators, actual calculators, wherein if you add two numbers, then also result is shown in that field only. If you are subtracting also there only it should show, and multiplying also there only. So that you can make one modification. And another thing is, if you don't want to perform any operation, you want to clear the screen, then you can set text to empty string. Means set text inside the parenthesis, you can put only the double quotes, so the string will get disappeared, means nothing will be displayed in that field. So that also you can try. And since you have done this till now, this is basic level and it is very good for the first attempt. You can extend it. Just a minute.
Okay, so I
Uh,
will try.
yeah, you can extend it to. There is one Java math library also. You can try to explore that library, and you have sine function, cos function, absolute value, square root, many things you have there also. So that also you can try to implement, so that you can, like, you can use it now. Since you develop this calculator, you may use it in any of your other projects also. Not necessary you'll have to develop it again. So you can reuse one project in another project. That is also possible. Okay, so very good. Anyone else, you can
Okay,
stop
thank
presenting.
you.
Yeah. And one more thing about Sonali, that she has also uploaded the notes of her SQL lecture, what she attended that day, and she has written it in quite a detailed manner. So it's, I can share it with you all, and I was expecting more number of students to do that, because I'm sure it also helped her to revise whatever she learned, because the way she has written it is like the shorthand notes which will help you during your exams as well. So I hope even you could like revise, and now you know that how much I should revise and how much is sufficient, and you'll be able to recall it better. Am I right, Sonali?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So that is one benefit, that is of your own notes, your own handwritten notes. So I'm expecting more people. Okay. And the advantage that she will get, because she's the only person who has done it, is straight away +6 in her final exam, in the whatever exam I conduct. Okay. At the end of the course. Okay. You can stop presenting, Sonali. So we'll continue now. So we were saying that if we want to update the details in our database, and we are also going to use the GUI, means both JDBC as well as GUI. Screen is visible, right? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So here the program is, I'll first run it and show you so that you get the idea what we are trying to do. So here you have to enter the ID. Here you have to enter the name. This is for inserting, okay? Means you're storing a new row inside your table. So salary also you have to enter, and whatever is the address. And then you have to click on save records. Okay. Now, if you go and read the data, that is, we have seen already how we read the data from the same database. If I run this program now, that is to select from the database and to display it in the program, you will see that just now the entry that I entered. Can you see this here? Just now I had entered this one. Did you understand? Whatever we insert, that has got stored in the database, and then we have read it from the database. Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So now how to insert we will see. So in this program, as you saw, there were 4 text fields to enter the 4 values for the each of the 4 columns in the table. I hope you remember the table. The table was like this only, the 4 rows in which there is roll number, name, ID, roll number, name, what are the columns? ID, name, salary, address. Okay, ID, name, salary, and address. These are the 4 columns. And to tell that what detail you have to enter, like enter the name, enter the address, for that we have 4 labels. So 4 text fields, 4 labels, 2 buttons. One is to save, means put it inside the database, and the other is to exit the window. Then you have to establish the connection. You know how to give this. Okay, I'm not explaining in all the aspects because you have already seen that. You have to add them to the GUI, add the action listeners. We know what this is for. Then the connection. Then when you want to insert something, that time you have to use this prepareStatement method, and you have to call it on the connection object, that is con object. You have to call that on this con object. This con can be anything. I have named it as con for connection. And when you call it, you have to pass the query as the parameter. And now the actual data that we are going to store inside the database, the user will enter. So we do not know actually what the user is entering. That is why we only know that the user has to enter 4 values. We don't know anything other than that, that what the user will enter. We only know that 4 values he will enter. That is why this is the query that you can see, insert into table. You can give the column names, values, what values. In our SQL database, we have seen that we used to specify the actual values, like whatever the roll number, name, age, and addresses, that we used to specify here. But this time we do not know what are the values, because through the front end, from the interface, the user will enter, like how we did just now. So here this question mark you must place, and how many question marks? It should be equal to how many values you want to accept. 4 values we want to store in the database, 4 should be accepted, so 4 question marks separated by commas. Then whatever text is entered in the text field, that you have to store in 4 variables. Okay, and then whatever text we have stored in these variables, that should be stored in the database, right? Because from the text box, that is the text field, we have taken the whatever text the user has entered, and that we are storing in these 4 variables. So these 4 variables now have to be stored in the database. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we have stored them in the variables. Now in order to write these variables inside the database, we have to use a set data type function. Set data type means if it is an integer, then set int. If it is a string, set string. So set data type function. And you have to call it on the stat or statement object. And when you're calling it, we know that all the data from the text field is always in the form of string. So if the data should be, for example, ID, it should be an integer, then this is the function to do the type conversion. ID is a string. As you can see, all those 4 variables which we have used to store the details from the text field, all are strings. So you have to convert whichever is necessary to an integer. So ID is a string, but you're converting it to an integer, and then using this function you can store it. means you're telling that I want to store this value. You have not yet stored it. You're just telling that I want to store this value. Similarly, name, and you can also see that 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 is for the column. 1 means first column, 2 means second column, 3 means third, 4 means fourth column. And name is a string only, don't convert it. Salary is an integer, convert it. And address is also a string. And after that, in order to actually store the values in the database, stat.execute update. In case of select statement, where we are simply reading the values, we were using execute query, and in that we were passing the query. But for DML operations like update, delete, insert, execute update has to be done. That function you have to call, not execute query, but execute update. And finally, you can close the connection by using connection object.close. Even in that previous program also, you can close the connection. Whenever you make the connection using this, you have to always close the connection. Once you close the connection, and then if you execute any query, if you fire any query after closing, if you try to execute this insert query, it will give you an error, or it will show you an error message. And that will not abruptly terminate your program, because we are using exception handling. The exception handling will ensure that if such things happen, like connection is closed but still you want to execute some query, then it will go inside the catch block and it will display the message like connection is closed or not established connection or something like that. So that is why try catch is very important here. Now you might see that when we are establishing the connection, it is only when we are clicking on the button using this action event, this action performed. Whenever we click on the button, we are establishing the connection, executing something, and then closing the connection. To insert the next record, again we are going to establish the connection, do something, and again close the connection. So this is one way, but it is not an ideal way. Okay. So is this much clear, this program, how it is working?
Sir, what if we don't close it?
It will means if you don't close, that's also fine. It won't give you any error. But whatever resources or whatever code you have written, that will remain available for this operation. Means if the connection is open, still you can execute the insertions and deletions or whatever. But once you close the connection, you're not allowed to execute any other query. That is the main use of it. And also it is good to close something once you open it in order to handle the resources and whatever process are running in the backend. It may be still running or consuming some CPU. For that also it is necessary to close. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I've already executed, so I hope you understood this. So using GUI for the front end, and we are using the backend for communicating with the database using Java. So the only thing that change we have done is we are not interacting through the console. We are interacting through the GUI. That is the only change. Rest everything, the program, what is the program, how we are using the program, everything is same. Next, in order to deal with this repeated opening and closing the connection, we will try some other logic as well in this next program. And this is to select conditionally. Now select can be just selecting all the data from the table. But sometimes we may not want all the data. We may want a particular row or a particular entity's data. For example, here you can see there are these many rows or entries in the table. We may want the data only of the person who has the ID 12. So select the data only if ID is equal to 12. So these four values, 12 Raj, 12 Pune, these four values should get displayed in the output, in the console or in the GUI, wherever you want. So selective selection, or you can say whatever you want, only that much you want to select, not all the details. So that can be done using a where clause, which is an SQL, which is the benefit of SQL only. Select all, or you can specify which column names also. Select all from student table where roll number is equal to whatever the user enters. Question mark means the user will enter some roll number or some ID, whatever. Means whatever the column name is. If it is roll number, then if the column name is roll number, here also roll number only has to come. If the table name is student, here also student only should come. And equal to question mark. so that whatever user enters, that roll number's details will get displayed. That is the only change. So you have now make one more note that in your first program where we are selecting just all the details, we are passing this query to execute query and we are calling it on statement object. But now we are going to call that query in a different thing, not execute query. We are calling it using the method prepareStatement, and on the connection object, means through the connection object we are executing this method. So whenever, how you'll remember this, whenever there is some dynamic action that you're performing, dynamic action means if the user is entering some values and based on that you're doing the execution, or user wants to execute or select specific details, means whenever the question marks are coming in your query, even in our previous program, whenever the question mark was coming, that time we have to use the prepareStatement method. Whenever question marks are not coming, and if it is a select query, that time execute query has to be used. And whenever you're using any updation or deletion or insertion, that time you have to also use the execute update query method. Okay, so remember this, that always for select queries, select is data definition language, means it comes under data definition language, DDL. You have select. For select, you'll always call the method on statement object, means if the object name is state dot, you will say execute query. For example, our first program, execute query on the statement object. And here inside this, you'll pass the query inside this bracket. This is to select everything. If it is select all, if it is select conditionally, means only particular values, that time you are using where clause, that time you will call the prepareStatement method also. And here you will pass the query. I hope you'll write this in your notes as well. Here you have to pass the select query along with the where class. And also you have to call the execute query. Okay. Select, if it comes, execute query has to be called always. On which one? On the statement object. So whenever you're using select, if it is select all, then only execute query. If it is select only particular data, means you're using question mark or placeholder, that time prepareStatement as well as you have to call execute query. But in the execute query, no query should be mentioned. Okay, only query will come in the prepareStatement. Here no query. And if it is your update, delete or insert commands, that time you have to call the method execute update. And suppose you're not using question marks, means the user will not decide what he has to input. Maybe in your program itself you have written the values. Instead of question marks in the insertion, you have written here which values you want, like 12, Bob, Pune, whatever the values. That time you have to not call the prepareStatement. You have to call only execute update. Okay, this is for without user inputs. But if it is with user inputs, means question marks you're using, that time you must call the prepareStatement. prepareStatement is used for writing and reading the dynamic values, dynamic variables. And here you have to pass the query along with the question mark. And once you pass it with the question mark, after some execution, you have to again call execute update. So I hope this summary will be beneficial for you. Okay, you can go through this later. But the main thing idea you have to remember is whenever it is select, it is execute query. Whenever it is update, delete, or insert, it is execute update. There is nothing like execute insert, execute delete. It is execute update only for all these three. Okay, and prepare statement will come only if you are using dynamic variables, that is question mark, along with the execute query or execute update. Is this clear? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here, whichever ID or roll number, in this case roll number, that one's data will get displayed. So this is the GUI, and here whichever ID you want. For example, I need to know which ID is existing first of all. I think 76 is existing. So 76, retrieve records. Okay, I think 11. Yeah, 11 is existing in the database. So roll number, if it is 11, his name and address, his name and salary I'm displaying. Okay, you can display the address also. But here in case I'm displaying only the name and salary. If you change the ID or the roll number and click on retrieve records, the data is changing. Now you might be wondering, why is this GUI so small? All this time it was a little bigger window. That is because I've used a pack method call. Pack, what it does, how much ever the elements are occupying space, only that much space will come. Means only this much you could see the GUI. But in our previous cases, it was somewhat this much breadth and height. So pack, what it will do, whatever space is required to hold the elements, only that much will be the size of the window. Okay. And then another, so is this clear, this program?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So just wait a minute, I need to connect my charger. Okay, so here we have studied 3 programs related to JDBC. And now we are going to study another element which we can use in our GUI. Till now we have seen which ones, text field, button, and label. Do you know any more elements that we can use in our GUI? Anyone knows any more elements that you get to see commonly? Have you heard of checkbox?
Yes.
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 So we have checkbox, we have radio button, then we also have,
Scroll bar, scroll pane.
yes, correct. That also we can have. Then we also have a list like that you use in your drop down menus. Means if you want to hold many values in the list, you can hold that also. Okay, so these are some common elements. So I'll be showing you one example and one I'll give you for your homework so that you get practice, because on your own you're not developing anything. So I'll only have to give you some assignment. Okay, so here we again, you know that we have to extend the frame and implement. Now we are going to use a list also. List, for example, I'll run this and show you so that you know what is a list. Okay, list is in another thing. Okay, this is a checkbox. Okay, here you can see car. Next to car, there's a small box. You can click it or you can remove that tick mark, means check or uncheck. And when it is checked, you can do some operation. When it is unchecked, you can do some operation. You might be seeing here in the console, here some things were getting displayed. That is because whenever I'm checking, I'm doing something. Whenever I'm not checking, I'm doing something. Whenever I'm clicking the button, I'm doing something. So you can use it for debugging. Whether the clicking is happening actually or not, you can display that by displaying some small messages over here. So here you have two buttons, as you can see, show and exit. one checkbox, and this car that I've written, which GUI element have I used to write that car over there? Any idea? Yes,
Label.
exactly, label. Okay, so it is giving us some information, label. So you have two buttons, one checkbox, you are adding them. Checkbox, how you'll do? Checkbox object name equal to new checkbox, and whatever the means, what is the meaning of the checkbox? Like it is for the car, so car you'll write over here. What is the use of the button? Show. So whatever text you want to associate with the element, that you usually pass as a parameter when you're creating the object of the button class or checkbox class or whichever class. Then when you click on buttons, you have to use the action listener interface, and whenever you're clicking on checkbox, you have to use the item listener interface. Okay, item listeners are used for checkboxes and action listeners are used for buttons. Item listener will also be used for list, and item listener is used for checkbox. But for buttons, you have only action listener. You'll add the action listener, add the item listener on the buttons and checkbox respectively. Now, whenever you're clicking on the button, you know what this means. Whenever you're clicking on the button, and if the checkbox state is true, means it is checked, print in the console hi. Otherwise, what is the condition? If it is unchecked, means the get state will return is equal to false. If it is false, that time by should get displayed. That is why whenever I check, I'm going to get a, whenever the box is checked and when I'm clicking on show, you can see hi is getting displayed over here. I'm going to click it once more. See, checkbox is checked. I'm clicking on show. The hi is getting displayed over here. And when it is unchecked, that is the else part. And that time, if I'm going to click on show, by is getting displayed. And also, when I'm checking and unchecking, that time also I'm displaying a message like checkbox 1 is checked, checkbox 1 is unchecked. So button, whatever functionality you want to apply, that is in the action performed. And whenever you're clicking on the checkbox or list, that time item state changed. These are the built-in methods, means they are the abstract methods in those two interfaces, action listener and item listener, which we have implemented here. Those abstract methods are there in that interface, which you are overriding over here. Action performed and item state changed. So similarly, whenever the checkbox is getting checked, its state is changing. So if the checkbox C1 is checked, you may have multiple checkbox. So if C1 is the checkbox that you have checked or unchecked, and if the state get state is true, means if C1 is the checkbox you are considering, and if it is checked, then display checkbox 1 is checked. Else what will happen? Suppose the condition is false, or suppose C1 is not selected. You know that logical AND operation means what? Any one is false, then this whole thing is false. Then the else part will come that checkbox 1 is unchecked, or checkbox 1 is not under consideration. Whatever you want, you can display. So whatever actions you perform on a button, that you have to define it under the action performed function method, and item state changes for the checkbox or list. This is the only change. So is this program clear how it is working? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now there's another program in which you're using list. First of all, I'll run this and show you. So here what I'm doing, you can see hobbies, swimming, reading, yoga. There's one box over here, display hobbies exit. Now tell me, seeing this, which entity is a button, or which one is a list, or which one is a label? Can you tell me which one is which element? Display hobbies and exit, which are there?
Buttons.
Yes.
Like there are two buttons in it.
Yes. What about the other elements?
3 checkbox,
Okay.
1 label, and
Yes.
I think text area, maybe. I don't
Actually,
know.
this is a list. Okay. This is a list. Text areas are usually small, means they are rectangular and they have more width usually. Means you can change that also. But if you are means, and also one thing that you could see is if it was a text field, the background or the color inside that box was white color. But here it is the gray background of this window only. So this is a list actually. And this checkbox that you see here at my mouse pointer, is it for hobbies or is it for swimming?
Swimming.
Swimming.
Yes, it is for swimming. So always that box appears and then the corresponding text. Okay, not the text and then the box. So box, text, box, text, box, text. This text is associated with this checkbox. Okay. Now when I click on swimming and suppose yoga, you can see the checkbox state has been changed. This I'm displaying in the console. This is for the developer, not for the user. What the user will be able to do is when he clicks on display hobbies, whatever he has checked should appear in this list as the elements or items of the list. Suppose I change the selection, now only swimming I have selected. If I again click on display hobbies, only swimming should be displayed. If I select all, everything should be displayed. If I select nothing, the list should get empty. So this we have to implement now. So list is again, you can call your object anything. Okay. Here I've used more meaningful names, semantic names like hobby list. I've not used C1, B1 or something like that. Then I'm creating the checkboxes, which you've already seen. You can create the list using new list, and what should be the number of items that the list can hold, that is equal to 10, that you have to pass here. Then you have to use action listeners for the buttons and item listeners for the list or checkbox. Then this you know it. Now if you're clicking on the button, then you must start to display all the selected items in that list. Whatever is selected, you must display in the list. Okay. And if it is the exit button, you have to simply exit. So our main logic lies in the button when you're clicking, how it is getting the checkbox, the information of the checkbox you have to display. For example, if swimming is the checkbox, then swimming should be displayed in the list. For example, if swimming is the checkbox, the checkbox name is swimming. Okay, the name of the checkbox is swimming, and the text that you can see along with that box is also swimming only. Okay, so don't get confused. Swimming is the name of the object, the checkbox object which we have created. That name is swimming, as well as the associated information is also swimming. Okay, so you have to, whenever the state is changing of the checkbox, that time in the list you have to add the label of that checkbox. The label of checkbox means whatever text is there along with the checkbox. So whenever the button state is true, means you have clicked on the the checkbox. Whenever the checkbox you have clicked on it, means you have checked it. If it is true, the state is true, then in the list name is selected hobbies dot add. What you'll add? The label of the checkbox. Okay, this is for when you're clicking the button. What if you're only checking and unchecking? That time also I'm displaying that checkbox state has changed. That you can do by item state changed. So whenever you're checking the checkbox state changed, that will get displayed. So item state changed and action performed. These are the two methods to implement the logic that should be occurring when you do some action. So is this program also clear?
Yes.
Okay, so this is more of your self-study actually. You must go through keenly that what things I've mentioned over here. So basically there are a few steps that you have to do always. One is you have to create the objects of the particular class, text field class or label class, list class, whatever the class is. These are the fixed steps. Create the objects. Then what you'll do, you have to in the try block, that time there you have to pass whatever parameters, like whatever text should be along with that element that you have to pass. So you can say that pass parameters. After that, you will add the action listener, add action listener or the event listener. Action listener or the item listener. Then what you'll have to do is you'll have to add them to the GUI. After adding, you have means till now what you have done, you have created the objects as well as added them. Now only the logic that when you click something or when you check something or when you whatever those actions you have to define, you will define them in the action performed method or in the item state changed method. So these are few steps that you have to perform, and most important is in order to implement all this, your class should be a child of one class and two interfaces. It should be a child of the frame class to create the window, and it should be a child of the action listener and item listener interface. Your class should be children of these. Okay, so are these steps clear? If you keep such things in mind, like which are the steps to follow, I don't think you'll go wrong. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, so your homework is to develop this swimming hobbies thing, this checkbox which I showed you. Whenever you're checking something, those things should get displayed in the list. Now, when you're implementing this, you will get one small problem. If you have noticed that or no, I don't know. And that you have to solve on your own. Okay, that you have to solve on your own. I hope you encounter that problem. Now, you let me know if you have any doubts. Anything which you were expecting more or anything like that. So can you give me some ideas like what kind of GUI can we display? Like you saw so many functionalities. Like if we click something, that particular some information related to that event should be displayed in a list. So this is one functionality. What else can we have? Can you think of something?
If suppose we order some, if we suppose develop a GUI in such a way that if we suppose order a few grocery shops, then they get automatically stored in the list.
Yes. Okay,
And
that is one good thing. Like you can create a to-do list also, like somewhat like that you were saying. Means whatever jobs you want to do, you can, for example, if the GUI you have, I'll have to draw that. Okay, suppose you have a GUI. You can also decide the shape of your window. Okay, suppose this is the GUI. Then you may have a field over here in which you can actually type what is your task for the day or something like that, or what you want your long-term or short-term goals. Then whatever you type should get saved on clicking a particular button. Okay, suppose this is that button. Then you must have another place where you can maintain a list of all the items which you have entered. You yourself have entered those items. So what items you have entered, that you can have over here as a list. Then um, at the side of that list, you can have a particular another block in which in that block you may have a checkbox so that an item is there in this list and corresponding there's one checkbox. If you select that checkbox, then the work is done. So you can click on another button so that whichever items are selected or checked, when you click on that other button, they should get deleted from the list. So you have another button which is used to delete whatever is checked, those items only. Or this checkbox, you can have it inside the list also. Try to nest the elements also. Okay, and you may set the priority also. You can do some sorting also, like which is the most important and all. So you can do many things like this. So will you try this application on your own initially? Then if you want any help, we can do it together. Will you try it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is quite interesting, I guess. It will help you in your daily work also. So you try that out, and we'll stop here for today. Any doubts you can put it in the chat box, and sorry, any doubts you can ask me and put your attendance in the chat box.
Can we create forms in this, like fill the form and submit the that?
Yes, yes. That you can do with another concept that is called as servlets or JSP, Java Server Pages. In that, what happens is you have a HTML file in which you can design the form more efficiently. You can enter the data in that form, and then it will get stored in the database using JDBC, and you can access it in another GUI also, or in the same form itself. Means you can create a website also instead of a GUI. So that I think website will be more efficient than GUI. Means GUI you may need more efforts, but with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, the form designing becomes easier. So that we'll see after we finish the GUI and JDBC. Anything else? Any other doubts? Anyone? If not, you can leave this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.